Okay, I just shared the password with you. That's your password. No.
Hold on. Welcome, everyone. Our finance committee meeting is live at the moment. And so at this time, I'd like to acknowledge that we are privileged to meet on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Squamish and the Statliam Nations. And our apologies for getting started a little bit late. We're having a few problems with technology at the moment, but it's sorting itself out quickly. And so with that, I'll just acknowledge that there's a few people who are still working on getting their technology up and running 100%. So we'll let that carry through and perhaps give everyone maybe until 10:35, which is just 2 more minutes.
I think you can get started and they
get settled. Do you think we should just go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay, well then why don't we just go right ahead and we will perhaps go for agenda item number 1, which is the recommendation that the agenda of this meeting be approved.
Can someone second that?
Okay, April, thank you. Are there any objections to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll say that that is approved and move on to our number 2 item, which is recommendation for the minutes. Is there someone prepared to make that motion?
The minutes of the finance committee held on May 8th, 2024 be adopted.
Thank you, April. Is there a seconder for that? Thanks, Celeste. Anyone object? Seeing none, that is also passed. That brings us down to item number 3, which is a presentation from the auditors. And that will be our 2023-2024 financial statement. So at this point, I will turn it over to the auditors.
Oh, it's myself, Donna Discus. That's
Oh,
here
and there's
today.
Donna. Donna, thank you so much for joining us.
And this is, maybe I'll just start out. This is just an opportunity for us to speak with the finance committee about our audit plan for the 2024 fiscal year. So as everyone knows, the fiscal year for the school district ends on June 30th, 2024. And so our audit process is, or what we've done so far in terms of that audit, is we've had some preliminary meetings with management just to get up to speed on kind of the changes that have happened with the school district during the year, are aware of certain changes in processes. I know one of the big things is the sale of Pemberton House that happened in September. And just, get an update on things. And then we've done our formal audit planning, which we did in May, which is just to, purpose of the planning is just to get a kind of a more in-depth understanding of the school district and any updates. And so part of that planning is just asking more detailed questions about things at the school district, updating our understanding of your business processes, doing things as part of the audit, like setting our materiality levels and looking at where the risks of misstatement are. And then our actual year-end audit is scheduled for August. And so in August, we do what we call a hybrid approach to the audit. So our audit team will we interact a lot with Elena and her team in terms of getting information electronically. We will work in our offices, looking at the information that's provided by management, picking samples, and then we actually come out to the school district. I think last year it was about 3 days, Elena, 3 or 4 days. Yeah, and to do our detailed testing. And then what we'll do is report back to the finance committee back in September. So we're able to meet the provincial deadlines, which is to file the audited financial statements by September 30th. So that's kind of a big picture process. So right now we're just we've just completed our audit planning and are kind of waiting for the year end to happen and waiting to do our detailed audit procedures in August. So a couple of things just to confirm, it's got kind of some mandatory things to discuss with the finance committee. Independence, and so as auditors there are requirements to be independent of the school district, so that we can report on the audited financial statements. And so just confirming there's nothing that would impact our independence. The only services that we provide to the school district are just the provision of audit services, so nothing from an independence perspective. The other thing to highlight, just because the school district is part of the province, and the provincial auditors are the Office of the Auditor General of BC. We're known as what's a component auditor, and so what the Auditor General will do is ask us for copies of our reports to the school district and any findings that we have as part of the audit, because they rely on that work to be able to report on the provincial accounts. And so we do that in a couple of phases. We'll report to them on planning. We haven't yet received the letters from them, but we'll report to them on planning when we get that documentation. And then when we finalize the audit, we'll report on the results of the audit and communicate with them. I also know as part of our planning process that the Auditor General, the provincial accounts have a March 31st year end. So I know that the Auditor General asked the school district for some information just with respect to the March 31st, 2024 balances. And I think management has provided all that information that the Auditor General requested. That's kind of a big picture perspective. In terms of kind of the way we do our audit and the areas of focus, I would say there are no big changes in accounting standards or auditing standards from the prior year. And so nothing new that needs to be taken into account. I think just a few things to highlight, which I think we've highlighted in the past, are areas where there are estimates made in the financial statements, and that's kind of an area where we spend some time just making sure that the estimates are reasonable. And those two areas, I think in particular for the school district, are the estimated future actuarial liability for some of your sick and severance and other employee-related accruals. And so the province engages an actuary to prepare that actuarial estimate, and then as auditors, we'll take a look at the assumptions and the data that the actuary uses to make sure that those estimates are reasonable. So we'll do that again this year. And then the other thing where there's an estimate involved is in the asset retirement obligations. So the accounting standards require you to, or the school district and public sector entities, to estimate any liabilities related to any of the properties that you own. Specifically in the school district case, I think much of those liabilities are related to asbestos in the buildings and what it might cost to remediate those buildings should you do something to the properties. And so there's an estimate involved in that determination of the asset retirement obligation. The province has provided specific kind of templates and guidance on the estimates, that the way to go about making those estimates. But as auditors, we need to review those estimates and make sure that they're reasonable. So we've done that in the past, and we'll continue to do that this year. From the other kind of procedures perspective, we do kind of sampling through a variety of different parts of the financial statements, but just in terms of highlighting kind of big picture, the areas kind of that receive the most focus, I think salaries and benefits, because most of your expenditures are salaries related. We do quite a bit of work in understanding the systems around how you process payroll and then testing the payroll data. Similarly, for capital expenditures, there is just assessing the appropriateness of the accounting for those capital expenditures, plus looking at the expenditures themselves, and we'll do sampling on that. Other expenditures, we'll also do sampling on the non-payroll related expenses. And then on the revenue side, we do get confirmations from the province in terms of the funding that the province has provided to the school district, and look at what the funding was for and how to account for some of that funding if it's restricted versus non-restricted. But we also do procedures around the tuition revenues that you also receive, and the school generated funds at the individual schools. So that's a very high level overview of the audit process, but happy, I don't know if Danielle or Elena want me to talk about anything else, but happy to take any questions or comments.
Well, I'm good. Thanks so much for coming today, Dawn. I appreciate it. I don't have anything else I wanted to add.
No, me neither. Thank you, Donna.
We just have one question from one of our board members, and that's Celeste. So I'll turn it over to Celeste right now.
Hi, Donna. Can you hear me okay?
I can, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your continued work and assistance over, I think has it been 3 years now?
I think this is going to be our 4th year this year.
Yeah, thank you for that. So the only thing that I had in terms of, and this may not be a question for today, but this is a question that has been on my mind. So is there anything that the auditors would flag as concerning, given that we're moving into a time of declining enrollment, projected declining enrollment, and that we have very little unallocated surplus planned for future?
It's always one of the I guess one of the things that we always have to consider as part of the audit process is just the environment that each client is in. And so I think in terms of our risk assessment, when we look at those types of items in terms of the surplus balance, we're not, as auditors, opining on like how much surplus should you have, but we do need to look at things like in those parameters, does it impact at all what we call the going concern basis of accounting? I don't think it does in this case because of your role as a school district as part of the province. But one of the things that we also want to highlight is there an increased risk because of that the accounting, there might be a bias to do accounting one way or the other. And so that's where we'll look at if there's potential cutoff issues or a bias to do like something to make the results look better. So we factor that into our kind of risk assessment process. But there's nothing as part of the audit that says you should have this much of a surplus or your enrollment's down, so therefore that's kind of an issue. That's kind of a roundabout way of answering that question, but
yeah, no, that's fine. I understand, and I know that at some point in the process you're going to give us a report in writing as well. So just keeping that in the back of your mind, so that the board can best understand the climate that we're entering into and understand the risks associated with that. It would be helpful. Thank you, Donna.
I think the other part of this kind of meeting is just to see if from a board or finance committee perspective, if there are particular areas where you, the members of the committee, think there are heightened risks that either you think we should take into account as part of the audit process, or sometimes depending upon what those risks are, where you might like us to do more work in a particular area. So maybe open it up to see if there are kind of any hot buttons in terms of particular risks that you see other than the one you've mentioned, Celeste.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Sure. So just touching on that, for one of the issues that potentially is coming down the pike as a the seamless day and how those impacts are going to, but it's probably a year or two out, right? They've got a pilot project going on now for seamless day with 3 schools to put. So I'm just wondering what kind of a fiscal impact that's going to look at, and any contracts that we've got with Sea to Sky Community Services, and if there's implications and risk with any of that. I'm not sure
Yeah,
if there is, so.
yes, but I guess what I would clarify is that and correct me if I'm wrong, Rosemary, but the auditors, the function of the auditor is to ensure that we're applying proper accounting practices to the work that we do, and then discussions around if we want to, how the board in their governance role for finances would like to have conversations or questions around the amount of monies that we're putting forward in those implications. Those would be questions of the finance team and this team. I don't believe, Rosemary, your audit firm would be commenting on.
Overlaps of other
Yeah,
other jurisdictions.
Donna, sorry.
Yeah.
I believe it's more about risks if we're missing.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I think it's more like what I was thinking as if sometimes there's risks around a particular, like if you said, oh, I think there's a risk around payroll that, no, I'm not suggesting this in any way, but that employees could be set up that don't work at the school district or something. If you had a risk about that, then we could design procedures to make sure that we address that risk.
Yeah.
And I'm just using that as an example. I'm not saying that that's the case.
No, and I'll just speak a little bit to Seamless Day. Like we have a pilot project right now. We're going to be expanding it. It's not staffed by Sea to Sky Community Services. It's staffed by our internal employees. And we're getting money from the province and the grants, and we charge a minimal amount to parents. There's very little risk there. So I don't see any issues with it.
Any other questions for Donna? Okay, I don't see any other questions at this time. I'll just quickly look to Rachel just because she's joined us via Zoom, and sometimes it's hard to notice if your hand went up. Rachel, is everything comfortable, feeling okay with you, or do you have anything you'd like to comment on?
Well, thank you. I'm good. Appreciate it.
All right, a little bit of trouble with your sound, but judging by what I saw on the screen, it sounds like you're okay. You're good. Thumbs up. Okay, thank you so much. That's great. With that, then I think we can thank Donna so much for her time, and thank you for your comprehensive overview of what is to come.
We'll look
You're
forward
welcome.
to seeing
You're
you again
welcome.
in September.
That's
with results.
lovely. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so
All
much
right.
for your time,
Thank
Donna,
you.
and for all your hard work.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you.
Okay, terrific. With that, we will move on to item number 5, which is an information item, the 3-year financial plan. And I'll turn that over to either Elena or Danielle. Both of your names are there.
Yeah, I'll get started. I'm gonna pull up the document and go through it with everybody, and then Elena and Chris feel free to jump in if I miss anything. So just pardon me while I put the document up here. And too many documents open, so it's not letting me pick that one.
Just take your time. No worries.
Here we go.
There we go.
Okay, so this is our 3-year financial plan. And some of you may recall the last time we presented the 3-year financial plan, it was in the September 2023 board meeting. And I wanted just to let everybody know we changed the timing of the presentation of this to match up with the budget, because it's related, like the budget numbers that we are going to be presenting to you today are included in here. So I think it's good time to have the budget and this document done at the same time. So last year, if everybody recalls, that was our first time doing it. It's a new initiative that the ministry has us every school district doing. It's a yearly submission we have to make to the ministry. But it's good because it makes sure that you're looking at your financial sustainability over the next 3 years, and you can keep an eye on what your financial situation looks like for each school district. Okay, so I just wanted to, before we get started, let you know that this report does not need board approval. But it does require like board discussion, so it is required to be like on the agenda for us to present it. And I'm gonna go through it, and like Elena and Chris, feel free to jump in. And if anybody has questions, feel free to jump in as well. So basically, the purpose of this report is so we can look and make sure that their school district is financially sustainable. So we look at things like what Celeste had mentioned earlier, like if our enrollment is declining, what are we doing to make sure that over the next 3 years that we can, you know, we can balance our budgets, right? So that's basically that, the purpose of it. And we did change this. This is a new graph that we put in. And I just wanted to go over some of these timelines with you. A lot of you are familiar with them already. So we're planning on sending out our budget survey this year, for the next school year, sorry, a little bit earlier. So we're probably going to send it out in November rather than December. And that gives us a bit more time to analyze the results and group it and look at it and make sure, because we always feel like we're rushing to get it ready for everybody to review, because it's a lot of data. So we're planning on sending it out in November.
Can I jump in just to add to that? Thanks so much. That's a really good summary. I did want to add an additional rationalization for doing it earlier is, again, if we can get it in the hands of partner groups earlier, those folks who represent those groups, they can be sure that they're having the time to consult with and share with the folks they're representing, because it was a little bit rushed last year, and I think we can do a better job of getting more input and more voices heard. So when representatives do come to the partner group meeting, we have more confidence that more folks have been consulted.
Agreed. Thank you. Thanks for adding that in. Okay, and then as you can see here, the plan is to review, have the results reviewed at the partner group meeting. So hopefully we have a lot of time to send it out to the partner groups ahead of time to take a look at. So that's the plan is still to have the partner group meeting in February. And also in February, every year we send the ministry our school enrollment estimates. And that's a critical enrollment data that we send to the ministry, because that's what sets our funding up for the next year. And then that February enrollment estimate we sent to the ministry ends up showing up in the March grants announcement from the ministry. So that's when we end up finding how much we're going to be getting from the ministry. And then skip forward to, so in May and June, we always do our first, second, and third readings of the budget. And so that's where we're at right now in this current cycle. We're doing the final second and third reading today. And then further out here, so everybody's aware that September 30th is our snapshot date. So we kind of work after September 30th, we work on just finalizing that data. And then, you know, send our snapshot sign off to the ministry. So we, you know, at the beginning, mid-February, we have that finalized, and that helps set up our next budget, which you can see here, October, December, we start working on the budget. We send out the school budgets in that time, and then we work on the amended budget. And then January, February, we're doing our amended budget with the board, and then we're having that adopted in the bylaw done then. All right. So let's skip to the next one here. This is basically the same slide we had last year. There's 3 kinds of budget funds that we have: operating, special purpose, and capital. And the next piece is the strategic, like basically budget needs to align with our strategic priorities. And our strategic priorities haven't changed. It's the same items that we had last year. Some of the details have been updated, but it's still, our focus is student learning, equity, truth and reconciliation, mental health and well-being, and community engagement. And these things, Chris Nicholson, our superintendent, will be talking about later this evening in the open board meeting during his year in review presentation. You'll hear a little bit more about those things. Okay, so this is our student enrollment graph. You'll hear a little bit more about enrollment from Paul this afternoon or this evening as well. But I just wanted to share what the colors all mean here. So the green colors, what our student enrollment has been from the year starting 2017-18 to 22-23. So that's a 6-year period. So you can see it was steadily increasing and it's starting to come a little bit down. And the dark blue color is, those are what our budgets were based on. So the 23-24, the current year budget, and the 24-25. So the budget that we're presenting today, that's the enrollment number sitting in there. So you can see it's very flat. And the lighter blue is our projected enrollment. Sorry. And that's based on our most recent demographer report. So that's Berger. So you can see it's starting to dip. But if you look, back to 17-18, it's still not that. So we'll see. Interesting to see what happens here. Any questions so far?
How do you make these guesses based on 26, 27? Why do you think that it's going to drop by 200 children, 250 children?
Thanks for the question, Melissa. So every year we have Berger, who's our demographer, and they provide us what they think for each school site our enrollment is going to be. And so that information comes from them. So they actually go like 5 years out or whatever it is. They go 5 years out and say, this is what each school is going to be. And so that's added together. And if we think it's going to be a little bit different, that might be adjusted as well. But for the most part, that's based on what they've projected. And they use all different kinds of statistics to come up with that information. They look at birth rates in the area, like all those kinds of things to come up with that. Does that help?
Yeah, totally. That's what I thought. I just.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I recall correctly, they're usually pretty accurate. Is that right?
They're pretty accurate. Like once in a while, they might have like a little thing, and it could be, there could be a little error, and it could be because we changed, the area.
Catchment.
A catchment area.
Yes.
So we did change a catchment area a couple of years ago, and it was a little bit off because of that. But once it stabilizes, it looks like they're in general for us. So some school districts say they have found that they're not accurate, but for us, they have been pretty good.
And in the years that are not shown on the graph, does it continue to go down if you've got 5 years of data?
I think, well, maybe you remember, but I think it's pretty similar, like slow decline or pretty level. Is that what you recall as well?
Don't have a clear picture of what that looks like.
Mhm.
27, but I know that sorry. Am I coming through okay? Oh, wow.
You're projecting well.
Yeah. I know that when we do look at Berger, after 4 or 5 years, the accuracy, it tends to level off. So that they can predict the next 4 or 5 years fairly accurately, but then after that, it's fairly flat. So, yeah.
But right now, they're not showing any drastic changes. So no drastic drops or increases in the next.
The other thing just to point out, with these kinds of graphs, if you look at 2017, and then you look at 21, 22 at its highest point, the graph makes it look like it's more than doubled.
Yeah, it's not.
Right? And really that only represents maybe a 1 or 2% difference, just because the baseline starts at 4,700. I think most folks probably understand that, but I just want to point out that the changes aren't quite as dramatic as it looks like visually on the chart.
Yeah.
And they would also be taking into account the new demographic models from like the city of Pemberton and Squamish and all of the new development that are coming online with the housing starts. Yeah. Okay.
Just to comment on that, though, a difference of 400 children is a lot.
Yeah.
That's a school.
Yes, it
That's
is
a whole
lot, but
entire school.
It's
Just to.
Yeah, no, I understand.
perspective,
I was
yeah.
just pointing out that it makes it look like it's more than twice. Like,
Yeah.
Just, if you just look at the graphic, it's not white that. But yes, it is a significant. amount.
Okay. I'll move along. Thank you. Okay, and then the next graph is the per student funding. So similar here, these are the actuals for these 6 years. These two are what we know and what we're aware of that the ministry gave us in the budgets. And these are two our estimated amounts. The next 2 years. So, I mean, Elena, I don't know if you want to go over how that was estimated. The per student funding.
We do not have estimated per student amounts from the ministry. And when we ask them what was the best approach to do multi-year financial plans, they recommended just to look at the past, how per student rates were going up. They don't go linear up. They go some years a little bit more, some years even flat. So we took average of 10 years to estimate last 2 more years. Also, if I may please add about enrollment, just a little note, it's not just demographer, we do adjust slightly on whatever we have been adjusting regularly when we submit that to the ministry. So we took local knowledge, we took the Barger, and we usually adjust Barger, not much, it's pretty much Barger, the demographer numbers, on slightly high. Usually we come up slightly higher, but whatever we submit. But for the most part, it's demographer. So, there is information at the end of this multi-year plan. What assumption was? It does say that we adjust to our local knowledge. So.
Thank you. Okay, and then the next slide is on international revenue. So as you can see, I mean, this is COVID, so you can see that COVID negatively affected our international revenue as it did with all other school districts. And we haven't, like here, this was prior to COVID, we haven't quite recovered yet. So the 23-24 year at 170, I think it actually ended up being closer to 150-ish, 150 something for 23-24. And then for 24-25, this is what we currently have for registrations. We think it's going to go up higher in the next year, but we wanted to just make it very, as accurate as possible because we didn't want to overestimate. So we think it'll be higher than this, but this is what the budget's based on for next year. It's this 140 here, the next 2 years. Okay. And the next slide is staffing levels. So you can see it's pretty flat and not surprisingly, some of the staffing has gone down a little bit because of our enrollment decline. So that should be no surprise that if you have less students, you're probably not going to have as much staff as well.
I'll just interject. I think that's also reflective of where we see the bubbles. So as students move through the grades, there's different class size provisions and whatnot. So if you have lots and lots of new students in kindergarten and the limit is here, or you have lots of kids in the grad program and the limit's here, then you're going to have a differentiation. But this doesn't, I think it's really important to note this in no way means a reduction in staffing. It's just overall staffing levels. So as people retire and leave the system, it might be that we're just not hiring people in place, and because we don't have the enrollment to necessitate that. I want to make that really clear.
Thanks for that, Chris. I just have a really super easy clarification question. Can you just define who are support staff and who are other professionals, just for anyone who may not be aware of the difference?
Oh, Elena, do you want to?
Support staff includes 2 types of employees. They're unionized, the same like teachers. Support staff are all unionized, and there are 2 types of them: 12 months and 10 months. 10 months are those that work at schools, and 12 months they can work at school and at the district level. There are EAs are also supported, but they're shown separately. That the rest are drivers, custodians, building trades, all clerk staff, accounting clerks, educational department clerks, HR, reception clerks, facility clerks, all those positions are considered to be support staff.
That's great. Thank you so much for that.
And other professionals include, excluded staff like superintendent, secretary treasurer, and also you trustees.
Trustees,
Uh,
yeah,
other
there you go.
Terrific. Okay, that's terrific. Thank you for that. That's helpful.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll keep moving along here. Okay, the next section is just going over the assumptions that were made when we created the amounts for the 3-year financial plan. So as we mentioned, we use the demographer as well as some of our own information that we know, local knowledge to determine how many students we believe that are going to be showing up in the next couple of years. Inflation of services and supplies is that for 25-26, we estimated it to be at 3% and then 2% for 2026-27. So these are the same numbers that we used last year for those same years. So that's still estimated to be the same. And then we, for salaries, estimated, because we don't have a collective agreement or anything in place for these years, we're just estimating at 3% for 25-26 and 2% for 26-27. Benefit rates have increased significantly and they continue to go up. So that has all been included in there as well. And yeah, I'm just gonna skip to this next page here. So this is maybe I'll just leave it on here for a minute or so. This is our projection, our 3-year financial plan. So the first column shows what it was, the actual amounts for 22-23. The next column is the budget. So the current year that we're in right now, the 23-24 year. The next column is the 24-25 year. This is a budget that we'll be adopting today. So we'll be going over that again. And then these 2 years, we use those estimates that we just talked about to determine how much to put in there. So you can see the operating revenue is slightly increasing and slightly dropping here, probably because of the student enrollment drop. And then you can see overall expenses slightly going up, and then looks like it's staying flat. And overall, you can see the net revenues and expenses here in this line. And what I did want to say was that overall, with the approach to this, we've had to decrease the amount of operating expenses that we're using to make capital purchases. So in other words, that's local capital. Sometimes you guys hear me talk about that. So the money that we transfer from operating and end up, making stuff to do capital. And to give you some examples of that is the computer equipment at the schools. We've used it to do the Don Ross renovations. We just don't have as much money to purchase capital stuff because of, inflationary costs and decreased enrollment. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. So that's why you'll see this under capital here, the amount starts to, get quite small. That's why it's around 100,000 towards in the next couple of years. And I just also want to mention that a couple of years ago, I think everybody's aware we adopted a policy, and we're now required to have between 1% to 4% in contingency funds based on our operating expenses. So based on what we've done here, this is putting us really close to that 1%. So it's getting really tight. And I just want to reemphasize that. I think everybody knows that it's a really tight budget. And it's going to, the way it's looking now, it's going to continue to be like that over the next couple of years. But we're looking really close to the 1% right now. And so we'll have to watch enrollment and adjust expenses accordingly. And I mean, we know salaries are continuing to go up. And so it's making it difficult to balance everything if enrollment is declining. So we just have to keep working on that. So we'll just have to keep an eye on all of those details. And any questions on this at all? Sure, go ahead.
Just would like to add some clarification. I don't think we ever mentioned that because now on Finance Committee, we look at three types of document. The summary, that multicolored document shows one numbers. Then we look now multi-year financial plan, also shows some revenue and expenses. And also there is a budget bylaw that shows everything. And just to be clear, budget bylaw includes operating funds, special purpose funds, and capital. Multi-year plan includes only operating expenses, even salaries. The teachers, for instance, that are funded through Classroom Enhancement Fund, they are not showing those amounts are not showing here. So this is pure operating funds and no special purpose funds, no capital, only local capital if any. And the summary document that we'll look at always, it's our working document. It shows operating funds and special purpose fund, everything non-capital. So if there are any discrepancy in totals, it's just due to the fact that we are basically looking at three different types of grouped differently types of revenues and expenses. So obviously we always match expenses to revenues. If we are talking about operating, and so grants operating and expenses should be operating as well. If we are talking about everything, everything includes all types of sources or funds.
Thanks
It's
for
just little
clarifying.
clarification.
Thank you. Okay, and then there's just the last page here that says if this is going to be posted to our website and sent to the ministry. So if anybody has any questions, my contact information is there. Anybody's interested. The public's welcome to email me. Okay, so I'm just gonna stop sharing. Yep. Go ahead. Celeste.
Yep.
So thanks, Danielle. I know this is something that you have to do, but I think that it's actually a nice summary for the public as well. Someone was just asking about enrollment, and so I just sent them this document. So it's a nice little snapshot. Do you know what the link is to look at this same report for other school districts? Is there a place where they're all linked
No.
online?
I don't think they're posting them. It would just be on their individual websites. They're not posting like a ministry level for this document. I don't
Okay.
think so. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions?
I don't see Molly. Let's check in. Rebecca, you have disappeared from the screen, or Rachel, sorry. Oh, there you are. Rachel, we couldn't see you when there was the screen sharing, so I just wanted to double check and make sure that everything is clear and you're okay, no questions or comments, or maybe so.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, I don't see any other comments or questions. Thank you so much to you both for your work on that document. And now we will move on to the 2024-2025 Indigenous Education Targeted Funding Budget. And maybe Danielle, I'll start with you and you can turn it over how you see fit, as we have several people listed to speak to this.
Okay. Who do we have listed? Oh, Rebecca. Okay, she's not here. That's okay. So it'll probably mostly be myself and Colleen. Elena, would you mind sharing the microphone with Colleen? Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to pull up the budgets, and I made some notes on some of the changes that were made so that I can just go through them with everybody, and then Colleen, feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything. So I'm gonna start with the before we get started, I just want to mention, so just as a background, every year the ministry provides us with per student funding for each student that identifies an Indigenous individual. So I'm just going to pull up the North budget. So what we do is we split the budget into a North and South based on the number of students that have self-identified in that region. And so we split up the funding, and then we meet with Indigenous Committee and Council, and we determine together what the budget will be for the next year. So anything you want to add around that, the process, or are you good with that?
We usually do a little bit of pre-work with the nations as well. So we'll meet with the education directors from the nations regarding particularly any changes in salaries, staffing, and sort of the staffing needs that both the school district and the nation feels need to meet. Any changes need to be made. That's what we try to reflect in the budget document based on the targeted funds that we have.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good point to make because we want everybody to be aware this is a collaboration. We're not just coming up with the numbers. We want everyone to be aware that we work closely with the First Nations to determine the budgets here. Okay, so I'm gonna pull up the north one here. Okay, so just before we get started on the north one, I just wanted to mention that in the last couple of years, there's been large surplus carry forwards from the north. And so what I'm talking about is like a couple 100,000, like this is over multiple years, they haven't been able to spend that money. So Colleen and I met with them and one of the goals was to spend some of that down next year. So we did increase a number of items in the budget to reflect that, and hopefully we're able to get to some of that. But so I'll go over some of the things that we did that is it's changed from the prior year. So okay, first of all, here for the number of students, we have the 259, that's based on the current year. So that's actually a decrease of 9 students from the last year. And this per student funding is $1,770, and that's an increase of $60 per student. So overall, like even though there's a slight decrease in the number of students, because of the offset increase to the per student amount, the north is actually only just a small, like it's only $150 less than last year. So it's pretty close. Now, as you can see, like out of the 458,000, 443,000 of that is made up of staffing. And so I just wanted to mention that these positions are hired by the First Nations to help support Indigenous students in our school district. So all of these individuals that work for the First Nations, they have holidays, sick leave, benefits, all of those things. And so we did have an increase here in the north to their wages, and we also had an increase to benefits. Okay, and then one of the other things that we added here, they had asked for an Indigenous Success Advisor top up. So we currently do have Indigenous Success Advisor for the north, but we've increased the amount of hours for next year up by 0.3 of a position. So that's an additional 37,000 will be used towards that. And then we've also added in this elders program here for 25,000. So hopefully we're able to get something like that in place. And then the other change here is this professional development line right here. We significantly increased that one. It used to be 9,000 and it's been bumped up to 17,500. And then we had an increase here as well to the Lilwat administration fee of $3,000. So it used to be $38,000. So did you want to add anything?
No, just that the Success Advisor, this is a top up out of targeted funding because currently the 3 Success Advisor positions are funded by the school district. And this is to go a little bit above and beyond to see the difference that having a little bit more time with students and also extending down into the elementary schools as per the committee and the council had discussed. So that's sort of what we're doing this temporarily to see, the changes it can make. And this was one way we knew we could do that is through the targeted dollars and particularly with the rollover that we have.
Yeah, so even though it's showing here a negative, because we bumped up so many different things, I think we're okay with it because we're estimating that we're going to have over $200,000 carry forward from this year. So we're just trying to spend some of that down. So hopefully we can. A lot of that's due to unfilled vacancies over the years and COVID. Yeah. Any questions on the north before we move to the south?
I'm wondering what the Lilwat administration fee is.
From my understanding, it's what at the head office they do to coordinate like everything, the whole programs there. So they hire all the staff, they organize their schedules all the day. So it's them to manage the program at the head office there.
And part of the ELEA, because as part of the targeted funding guidelines, that there can be an administration fee, but it also helps pay for their payroll and all those types of things. Squamish does something similar as well.
Well, thanks, Danielle. There's a lot that I feel like I need to understand about this. My understanding is that these workers do have what is written into the collective agreements for staff in the schools, like that applies to these workers. Is that correct?
No, these are workers that are hired by the First Nations themselves.
Okay, and paid
So
through the
they
school
work for
district.
the, like this, in this case, they work for Lilwat Nation, and Lilwat hires all of them. They have contracts with them.
Is it precarious? Is it year to year? Or
Other
casual?
contracts?
No, the staff are hired ongoing, but similarly to, I guess it would be any of our QP workers that we would have. They have a time of where they have to go through a probationary period. They have a very rich HR department which looks after all of the staff. We co-hire with them, so we're part of the hiring committee as a school district because we are contracting them for services for our schools. So we're involved in that piece as well. And yeah, they have their benefits and salaries and all those pieces on top of just their wages. And one of the things they actually have done is, because they are 10-month employees, gives them a little bit more flexibility, is that they listen to the staff and have prorated their salaries so that they didn't have to get a job in the summertime, so that they continually get paid throughout the year. So they are continuing contracts once they get through their probationary period.
Okay. One of the things that I was also wondering about is $43,000 a year is not, only working 6 hours a day. Like, who sets these numbers in terms of why is it 6? Why isn't it 7, let's say, so that they have prep time or whatever it is? Why are they only working in that 6-hour period where the children are in school? Is it us that sets that, or is it the nation?
The nation sort of sets out, the students are in session for 5 hours a day, and then they get an extra hour, which is the 6th hour. So that's above and beyond the instructional day, and they decide on the days and the holidays, and we work together with them to set that up. And if there's ever an opportunity to increase that time or flex the time, we do that as well. So we work very closely with them around that.
Okay. So if they're making $43,000 a year, I wonder if because it's based on a 6-hour day for most of these positions, with the exception of one, is that perhaps one of the reasons why the positions are difficult to fill? Because maybe that's.
I think it's similar. Actually, they're getting paid very well. Their salaries are actually quite high for that area. I think that it is the 6 hours, anything shorter. I know that was something that came up around bus drivers, that there was interest in the community, but because it was only 4 hours, people, like, what else could they do? So there are other learning opportunities. I know within the community, they have other learning opportunities and employment opportunities, like during spring break and other breaks, that they could choose to work. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to say this also, but all of our staff are status on reserve, so they're not paying any income tax either. So if this would be their salary that they receive plus their benefits on top of that. So that does help a little bit in terms of having a paycheck. I do get to see all of those pieces, but there are other small opportunities depending on their community. But I think most of the employment is somewhat similar for hours, and maybe just a bit shy of that with the nation. But for the most part, this is probably a decent opportunity to get into the school and work in the school district as well with us. So
that helps to know. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and move over to the south. There's a lot less changes for the south than the north. So I'm just gonna go over here. So the number of students that identified as Indigenous was 289. That is a decrease of 13 students from the prior year, so that has gone down. And the per student funding, as I mentioned, increased to 1770 per student. So there, overall, it did affect the budget for the South by $4,890 less than last year. So it's sitting at 511,530 right now. So similar to the North, most of the budget is made up of support staff hired by Squamish Nation. So you can see 511,000, 401,000 of that is for those employees. And so basically the only changes that we made in here were just increases to the wages and benefits. And we also added in an Indigenous Success Advisor top up as well here by 0.4, which is a lot. And so that's about $50,000. But that was the only other change I would recall. Anything else you wanted to add to that?
And I'll just add that their days and the amounts, the same thing, that's what the hours of the day was determined by the nation. They do a number of after school programs and such. And that's why their days is a little bit longer.
And I also think, and I could be wrong, but I think some of these, some of the ones in Squamish might be full year employees. And we're just paying for the school portion when they're in school. So the Squamish Nation might actually be paying them more than this amount because they're doing other stuff in the summer for them. We're just not paying our budget.
And during the breaks, they do a lot of culture camps and other things throughout the year. So they're an employee, and this is only a part of what they may be working on.
And then, so this one's a bit tighter. There's, they just have around, they're pretty much breaking even. It's like they're pretty much spending it all, which is awesome, which is what we want to see. So that's what the South looks like. So I do need a recommendation from the board to approve the targeted funds budget. So I'll just stop sharing here.
Sure. Thank you so much, Colleen and Danielle, for that presentation. I'll just ask if there's any other questions before I call for the recommendation. Yeah, seeing none, go ahead, Sol.
Colleen, do you think there's anything that should be changed? Are we getting it right?
That's a loaded question. No, I'm just joking. I think that I was just actually in a provincial meeting, and one of the things that I brought forward was that it's really nice to have the nations holding the targeted dollars and making the decisions on behalf of their members. Well, we do have off-reserve representatives. They do take that into consideration when they're planning their staffing, and that is very unique. We are unique as a school district in terms of the nations having that say and I don't want to say control, but we work together on this, and very much it all goes to our students who have Indigenous ancestry, who self-identified. So I think that we're getting it right in the sense that, there's now legislation trying to make everyone else do what we're doing. And this is something that's been going on for a long time in the school district. So I really think that we are doing things well and doing things right in terms of our targeted dollars. And I think it's really helping our nations have a larger voice in our school system, and always can build on that. Things can always be better, right? Yeah.
Thank you for your work.
Maybe I'll add, if I may, as you mentioned, to legislation. So a reminder to the board, and we discussed this at earlier board meeting, that for the next school year, so what will be in place for 24-25 is that boards of education actually will not be approving targeted funds. They're working on that deference model. So I appreciate that we go through that activity here and the board supports, but that will actually be completely changed as of next year, where the targeted funds will be shared, but it's in deference to the nations with working with our staff, of course. But next year will be a presentation, and there won't be any need for a motion. So we look forward to that for sure. Thank you.
Terrific. That I think will be a fantastic step. However, at this time, we do still need to make the recommendation. So if there's someone prepared to do that, thank you, Lisa. That would be terrific.
I'll read over your shoulder. That the Finance Committee recommend the Board of Education approve the 2024-2025 Indigenous Education Targeted Funding Budget as presented.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you very much, Melissa. Again, I'll ask if there's any discussion. I am seeing none. Anyone opposed? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 3, 5.
Rachel's frozen, I think.
I think Rachel might be frozen. We do have 5, and so that would mean that motion would be adopted. So thank you so much to everyone for the time that was put into that. And Colleen, if you can extend our thanks to the people in the nations, that would be really appreciated. I know that these things do take a lot of time and lots of thought and consideration. Lovely. Thank you so much. Okay, yes, you're free to go. All right, that moves us to item B, which is our 5-year capital plan. And we have Ian Curry coming to speak to that. So Ian, welcome.
Hi, thanks.
Yeah, take a second to get yourself prepared and then please feel free to go ahead.
Whoa, sorry about that. Yeah, so I'm here to speak about our district's proposed projects for consideration by the Ministry of Education. Okay, is that better? Yeah, so I'm here to speak about our 5-year capital plan submission in the 2025-26 edition for a major capital request. And in this year's project list, we have 2 major projects for consideration. The first being the Howe Sound Secondary Seismic Mitigation Project, which has been in our plan for quite a number of years. It's always been tied to an expansion project, and upon the recommendation of our reporting officer, we are no longer tying it to expansion due to our declining enrollment. So we're looking at a renovation or replacement of the B wing at Howe Sound Secondary, as well as the shops. They are identified or have been identified as in a H1 high risk seismic zone. So that's risk of liquefaction. So in the big shaker, they'll sink into the ground. So we're putting forward 2 options for the ministry to consider in our request for funding. One being not simply, it's a major project, but is to upgrade the existing wings as they are. And it involves structural bracing and all kinds of different things to prevent those wings from failing and sinking in the event of a big earthquake. So that's option 1. Option 2, which we're hoping is the more acceptable option for the ministry, is a replacement of those 2 wings. So the nice thing with that is we don't have to displace students. If we did just the renovation to the existing spaces, students would have to be displaced. We're looking at probably by floor. We do 1 floor and then the next. So those classrooms, we'd have to find alternate accommodation for those students during the construction. The challenge with that is it's science classes, and those are very expensive. So if we're looking at portables, they'd be very costly portables. The nice thing with the option 2 is that those spaces can continue to function while the construction is ongoing. And then because the construction is proposed to be in an alternate location, it's adjacent to the gym. So the students would be able to attend their regular classes in the B wings until the new construction is completed, and then they would be moved into their new classroom space and shop. And after that, the old wings would be demolished and would be turned into parking, we're taking parking to build the new space. We'd have to add the parking back once the construction's complete, so that B wing and shops would come down and it would be like for parking. So that's project one with two options that we're proposing to put forward to the ministry. The renovation and seismic upgrade is proposed or estimated to be about $21 million. The seismic wing replacement is $27 million. I know that $6 million is a lot of money, but for what we would end up with at the end of the day would be a much better option, better space for our students. It'd be brand new. So we're hoping that they will see that it's better bang for their buck, so to speak, if we look at replacing rather than renovating. So that's how we're going to put those projects together to the ministry. And then the second submission that we're proposing is a new childcare space at Squamish Elementary. And that is replacing a structure to replace the existing portable that currently houses Sea to Sky Community Services on our site. We are also expanding the program so that we can qualify under the program for funding. So the model that we're using for this project is the same model that is occurring at Ballycliffe. So it's a modular structure. We're using the same plan. It's a two space daycare facility. So we're confident that the costs that or the dollars we're requesting for this is consistent with the current ongoing project at Ballycliffe. We do expect some escalation, but currently this is the price that we have to go with. So that's what we're putting forward to the ministry. So the total request to the ministry this year is between 24 and 30 million, just over both, depending on which option that we end up with. And that's all I've got. If anyone has any questions, I'm available.
And sorry, before you finish off here, I think Heather and Phil, you guys are going to talk about the Squamish Elementary project, right? Right after this? Is that okay? Okay.
Yes, it's a two-piece presentation. So I'm speaking to the construction part.
Right.
And then the program piece, the expanded program and the new funding that's available through the ministry, Heather and Phil will speak to.
Yeah. So if you have questions around that specific piece, they will be presenting on that shortly.
Okay, I see that April has her hand up, so I'll let April go ahead with your first question.
So with the house Sound One, if we started building like tomorrow, I was certain I read that it doesn't, occupation wouldn't happen until 2029.
Yeah, so it's like any of our major projects, once we get the approval, which wouldn't be announced until, so if we're submitting for end of June, they review between now and then they announce early in the spring. So next spring, we'd get the green light that, yes, you can proceed with your construction. Then it's about a 5-year process from there until the construction's complete. So it's a big project and a big timeline. And it's complicated construction, especially if we go with just the seismic mitigation project. It's more complicated than demolishing and building new. But it is about a 5-year process. So year one, once they announce, say that, theoretical announcement that they approve the funding next spring, we have a year of project development where we're just putting together budgets, getting the team together, going out for public procurement, hiring all the consultants and experts that would be required on this project. And then we start the mobilization and construction. And I think if we were to fast track it, we might be able to get it done in 4 years instead of 5, but it's typically a 5-year process.
Well, best case scenario, the students and the teachers in the school would be under construction for 4 years.
Probably actual construction closer to 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I'll just jump in and say, I know there's been lots of coverage in the media lately about expansion and new construction. And that's where they're looking at modular systems and doing a provincial standard or a suite of choices for modular buildings. But our understanding at this point is that's only for expansion and new build. And as Ian said, because this is a more complex renovation, that may not necessarily apply. If it does, we'd certainly be very happy with that because that construction is significantly quicker. So we have to be conservative in our estimates based on current knowledge. So that's the current timeline.
Lisa,
I think, may I ask, this is our, I think you can be forward. How long have we been
Asking
asking for this? If any ministry folks are listening?
Since 2014. So, and we were promised that it would be addressed in 2015. So we've been waiting a long time.
Hopefully this is the year.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. That was part of my question. Ian, I always love your presentations. And how else can we help lobby so that this 10-year promise actually gets to get in the ground on your option 2, preferred by me? But how do we help you help us get this done?
That's a great question. And you know, the only thing that's changed is that we have positive support from our reporting officers at the Ministry of Education for this project, not necessarily the replacement, but supporting the seismic altogether. There was limited support when we were tying it to the expansion because of our enrollment numbers. So it really couldn't be supported at the ministry level, but they said, yes, go ahead and continue to push that project forward. That was probably the biggest stumbling block in the past, was that we were always tying it to an expansion project. So with it being strictly seismic and assuming that the province has kind of changed how they are addressing seismic mitigation projects in the province, ours is a high-risk project, so it should be addressed. I'm confident that we have a very good business case to support what we're asking for. And the better option is option 2, and we're going to push that really hard with our reporting officers. So when this goes in and we follow up with them, we will be promoting that they look at very seriously option 2, which is replacement.
If I may, just to answer your question, as you as trustees, if you want to help with this, you can talk to the MLAs in the area, right? Because that is who makes the decisions about which schools are getting renovated. Like usually they have some, they're the ones that have the influence, especially if they're in the party that is elected. So we'll see what happens in the fall, but I would be talking to your.
So as a follow-up to that, if I may, if I can ask or suggest through the chair that I have a couple of contacts. So if I don't have the past history, if I could have a Coles notes of this is when we requested, this is what this is how long, this is the this is the implications of those tax dollars. I'm happy to go talk to whomever will help advocate for this, because the inflationary costs, all of that has hampered tax spending and student needs. So if there's like a quick Coles note dossier that I can take,
So for right now, I would wait till the election happens. And then the board as a whole may want to write a letter, meet with the MLA.
Through committee of the whole.
I was gonna say, Lisa, thank you so much for your willingness to provide that advocacy. I really appreciate that. And I think just jumping in with what Danielle and Chris said, if you could make a note of that somewhere for us to place that on an agenda item for a committee of the whole meeting, and then we can approach it with a really thoughtful
approach.
method.
Because
and
I love what you do with it, Ian, but 10 years, 11 years is too long.
Agreed.
And anything that our voice and advocacy can do to ensure that this happens a little sooner than another 10-year cycle, I think we got to get on it.
Well, I'll just add to that point, and it was raised at BCST AGM. It was raised at superintendent's partner meetings that actually there are, I think there's 40% of projects, especially for seismic, are still outstanding,
Mhm.
40%.
Yep.
So that's we're in it with a number of districts. And I actually do recall at AGM, I believe that was one of the 32 that went forward. And I would just, and then maybe I should get off this because maybe it's committee of the whole, but that's why we always, our advice to trustees and to your trustee colleagues is really prioritize what the motions at
Yeah.
AGM are, so that what's most important to folks, especially when we're talking about student safety and learning, rises to the surface. So thank you, we can advocate together for sure. Do our part.
I can speak briefly to cost escalation. I'm going off the top of my head right now, but in 2015, the seismic mitigation alone, without an expansion, two options, was 8 million and 13 million, and now we're 21 million and 27 million. So
Okay, terrific. Thank you for that discussion, Lisa, and I will look forward to our committee of the whole meeting agenda item when that comes up. I think it's, like you say, super important, and it is a really long time to be waiting for that kind of work to be done. And Chris, yes, I agree. Prioritizing at AGM is really important. With that, we've strayed a little bit from finance committee items, but I think that's okay for a few seconds. But we'll bring our focus back, and I'll invite Ian. I'll say thank you, Ian, and invite Phil and Heather to come and speak about childcare in the future and what that will look like in our district.
Okay, so the little bit of speaking I'm going to do is at the beginning, and then I'm going to turn it over to Heather, who's been doing a lot of the work. But this is a follow-up. Many years ago, or a few years ago, we went through our review of community partnerships and childcare, and kind of what our priorities are. And as we know, community need is looking at expansion of childcare on school properties. That's community, that's provincial. This isn't any news to anybody. Both Heather and I, but Heather especially, have been working tirelessly of connecting with community partners, Village of Pemberton, District of Squamish, Whistler, childcare providers, et cetera, to figure out how we can make some of this come to fruition. And there's a whole lot of moving pieces behind it, including, community need, having staff available to do the work, et cetera. So what Heather's going to walk you through right now is two things. One of them is a minor capital application that we are putting through to the ministry to renovate, not really renovate, but equip a space in Pemberton at Signal Hill Elementary School for childcare, and make sure that it has the appropriate types of tables and outdoor play equipment for before and after school care. And then to what Ian talked about earlier on the major capital to replace and expand the childcare at Squamish Elementary. So over to you.
Thanks, Phil. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you again. So as Phil mentioned, I've spent you can go to the next slide. Who's on the slides? Is it our sheet? I've spent the last year and a half kind of learning the context of our district and building on relationships with community partners and so forth, learning about the current context of childcare in our district, but also in the whole province, and attending ministry meetings where I get to hear stories of how other folks are approaching this, which is also really helpful. So as Phil said, we're kind of looking at what we have the capacity to do, which always starts with actually staffing, because we have to have staff to be working in the childcares. So a lot of the conversation initially has just been about staff recruitment and retention, but we're in a better place with that now. And so the next step would be to look at available spaces in conjunction with needs in the community. So there is there's different application deadlines attached to different years. So with this minor application, this is for the 2024 to 2025 year. So a quicker turnaround time. And after talking with the staff at Signal Hill Elementary, and the principal, it was determined that there is likely going to be a vacant classroom in the school next year. And so there is an opportunity to apply for this funding to provide 24 before and after school spaces targeting children grades K to 2. So this would involve transforming a vacant classroom and designing it with, for example, one of our favorite go-tos is Naturopod furniture, just because it's natural wood, it's play-based, it's got lifetime warranty. And so designing something that would be connected to place, aligned with the Lil'wat principles of learning, the early learning framework, and for the space to be quality, accessible, affordable, play-based, and land-based. So this childcare would be managed by the school district and staffed by EAs that would take on the role of responsible adult. We have done an initial survey to EA staff at Signal Hill and Pemberton Secondary. And so far we have 4 interested staff. So again, this would be 24 spaces, K to 2. It would operate before school and after school. If we look at data, there are childcare needs assessments in all 3 areas, Squamish, Whistler, and Pemberton. I believe they are all 2019 to 2023. And we were actually just discussing at our early years table about the applying for grants so that we can get the next round of assessments going. But according to this document in Pemberton, there are 545 children ages 0 to 12 and 73 spaces. So that is 12.5 spaces for every 100 children. So there's a lot of need in the area. I hear it from families every time I explain my role. I get lots of conversation and questions around access to childcare, and wait lists are currently full. So there's certainly a need in the area. If you go to the next slide, just to give you just some visual idea and inspiration of what we'd like to go for. So this is an example of some of the things that might be included in the indoor space. And what I try to do when I think about all this is meet the needs of the childcare with also the needs of the school, because this space could be used for before and after school care, but also during the school day could be a very usable space for the school. So one thing that works really well is setting it up as a studio where classes can come in, and there can be social groups in there. There can be story workshop. There can be math stations, anything where we're using the same materials and furniture for, and it's all likely the same kids too. So let's remember they're all our kids, whether it's before school or during school, but just that we're really maximizing the use and that the community really benefits. And if you look at the outdoor environment, the next slide. So I've been gathering some data from the staff about the amazing outdoor environment already existing at Signal Hill Elementary. I have heard that surprisingly, even though there's wilderness all around on the actual school grounds, the staff are feeling a little bit like they're missing a bit of that exploration opportunity with nature, because there is a garden, but there's not a lot of trees there. So there's the playground equipment, but they are looking for things like a mud kitchen, outdoor connection with the land, outdoor classroom type stuff. Yeah, so in this case, with the application, we're not proposing to submit an application for playground equipment because that already exists, but we're proposing to enrich the area with more of this type of play stuff that could be used by hopefully by the childcare and the school.
If there's a mud kitchen, I'm there. Just saying, that sounds so much fun.
So should we pause for questions before going to all the way and then do questions? Okay. So that's the minor one. And then we also, as Ian mentioned, this is the major application at Squamish Elementary. And so in this case, we have an existing portable that houses before school care operated by Sea to Sky Community Services. It's covering up what my, I can look on here. Because I think it's currently 36, it's serving 36 children in 24 spaces before and after school, but also there's Strong Start that runs there every day. There's approximately 40 families that make use of that. So it's a very busy center. And one of our first priorities, even before looking at expanding spaces, is how can we make sure that our wonderful programs that are currently running can continue to operate. So that is why this location was in particular interest to us as we tried to think creatively about how to address this portable that needs addressing. And so an opportunity presented itself where, as long as we are increasing spaces, this could be part of an application that we put in. So that is where we came up with the idea, as Ian said, to build a modular that's 2 rooms. So one room would basically have the, we're kind of thinking of catering to 2 age groups. So for example, one space could be where the Strong Start and the younger kids are, and the other room could be for the older kids and before and after school care. But that's up for discussion. But so basically it would be keeping what's currently there and adding 24 before and after school spaces, targeting same age group, K to 12. The difference here is that where the Pemberton one at Signal Hill would be operated by SD48 and responsible adults, EAs acting as responsible adults. This one would be operated by Sea to Sky Community Services, and they would have their own staff as ECEs running the programming. And again, same thing. We're going for quality, accessibility, affordability, play, connection to land, the early learning framework and First People's principles of learning guiding our programming and pedagogy. In terms of the Squamish Childcare Needs Assessment, in Squamish, there's 3,866 children ages 0 to 14 in Squamish. And there are 779 licensed childcare spaces. So that is 20 childcare spaces for every 100 children. And wait lists are currently full. So definitely a need there. If we look at, again, indoor, outdoor environments. So if you go to the next slide, these are just photos for inspiration. I actually chose to go to UBC Childcare's website for these photos. So these photos are all from their site because I think they operate a very quality, pedagogically sound center. So this is just some of the idea of what an indoor space might look like. And in terms of the outdoor space, things like this are what you kind of see in childcares around that are emerging, where there's lots of natural materials, wood, there's covered areas for rain and sun, lots of opportunities for play. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. I'll take this opportunity to ask if anyone has any questions. Go ahead. Oh.
Oh yeah, just an update. So the minor capital one that we put forward is for $60,000 to be able to create that environment that the kids would need both in and outside of the school. And then Ian spoke to the $3.3 million for the other one. So 2 different. Back to the questions.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Ian. Lisa, go ahead.
So Heather, I'm just curious on whether or not any of the conversations with the ministry partners have alluded to relaxing childcare licensing requirements, because coming from that world and being in this world and then having worked in the school system as well, the ratios are so significantly different, and the ability to have a responsible adult versus a ECE, all of these kinds of things. Are they starting to have those conversations to make it easier for school districts to do this work rather than contracting it out? And I'm also curious on, and I know it doesn't impact the budget, so it was a great presentation, but the 8 a.m. starts. So in my research from back when we were looking at $10 a day, I was big advocate on some of the ministry tables, and there's a perception that the schools are going to start to take these things on. And 7 a.m., when I look at our declining enrollments, if you build the childcare spaces and you encourage the students to be on the premises, they don't go homeschool, they don't go to the alternate location. So I'm just wondering if we are setting that 8 a.m. start, or is the Sea to Sky setting that 8 a.m. start? Do we have the capacity to make it so that it's available for parents when they need that childcare timing? And I'd like to get the ministry on board with lightening some of this up so that we can actually do the things we need to do.
So I can answer those questions. Feel free to correct me at any point in time, but I mean, the Ministry of Childcare and now the Ministry of Education, who are together, are definitely looking at all of the requirements that are necessary to run before and after school cares and out of school age care on school facilities or at school facilities. And a lot has changed in even the 3 years that we've been running Seamless Day, about even from playground requirements to water testing to all these little barriers that we've had to work through. I can't necessarily say to advocate one way or another for a change in requirements of adult to child ratios. There's probably reasoning behind it, and that hasn't been a significant necessarily barrier to us. So I think that those conversations are happening with the people that are most qualified to be having those conversations. And this is definitely the work of the ministry and community partners and all the roundtables that they're having to figure out how to remove as many barriers as possible in as meaningful a way as possible. I think what was the second question?
Timing. 7,
Oh,
8
yeah.
a.m. starts.
So, right. Our timing is flexible. It depends on need. And what we have been finding is that the need has actually been like Seamless Day opens starts at 7:30. But then it's now, I think 7:45, and most people are showing up between 8 and 8:50 and 8:30. So if there is a significant need to increase the hours by half an hour, 45 minutes, we'll do it. It's just not necessarily what the need is right now. So it's always on the table and we'll always work with it. 8 is just the current start time. And then we'll continue to, again, the ask from the ministry isn't that the school district take on childcare. The ask of the ministry is that the school district work with community partners and or take on childcare and or whatever we can do to be able to provide not just before and after school care for school age children, but when we can also childcare centers for non-school age students, which we have done. I'm really proud of the work that this team has done over the past 7 or 8 years to make those happen, even when their grant money wasn't available. Ian and his team worked to renovate and support all these things at Brackendale Elementary out of our own pockets so that they could have non-school age care and school age care done at Brackendale. We moved our people out of kindergarten specific classes to get to be more age appropriately sized and fit to Sea to Sky Community Services. And we have a really functionally positive strength-based relationship with Sea to Sky Community Services. And they also benefit from doing this for a long period of time and running many programs across the Sea to Sky corridor to have a certain amount of employees so that they can handle when somebody is absent or when somebody or multiple people are away. They have the economy of scale to do this work, and it is part of their overarching mandate. So where we can collaborate with them, it's great. Where we can run parallel to them, like we do at Brackendale and like we'll likely see at Signal Hill, that's great. And then in absence of them, we'll do it ourselves as well. So it's just, I think, a really true community oriented way of taking care of our kids.
Go ahead.
Just one quick little follow-up while we're going through the financial side of things. Is there a fiscal model that we're preferring, right? Like, is fiscally, which is the better model with us right now? Is it the Brackendale system and the Signal Hill system or the Sea to Sky system? Which one is the bigger budget impact?
Well, none of them are really budget impacts if we're doing it properly because the wages, the fees will offset the wages. So there, I guess there is a little bit more, anytime we own and operate something, there's a greater responsibility on us. We are a public school system that aren't used to charging fees for things. So we make those as low as possible and to not run a profit. That's how our district operates, not all of them. And B, we are the people that also have to say, oh, wait, your kids can't necessarily come to before care or after care today. You have to pick them up because our staffing isn't available if that's the case too. So it is a higher liability to do that as these kind of offshoot programs. But I think it's the risk that crunching the numbers and figuring it out, it's still worthwhile to do it thoughtfully, methodically, and where the needs are the greatest.
Sure. Thank you for that. Melissa, go ahead.
Thank you. I did have a couple of questions and I'm sorry, I don't have it, so I can't look back, but you were saying that there's 3,800 plus kids in Squamish, age 0 to 14, and then 500 plus in Pemberton, age 0 to 12. Why did you choose 0 to 12 in one community and 0 to 14 in another? And also I'd like to speak about the covered areas. You said you spent some time at Signal Hill and you noticed that our children have almost no covered areas. So if this is something that we move forward with, I would really love to see the vision that you have for Squamish to also become Pemberton, where we need more covered areas for our children.
Yeah, the question about the different age groups is a good one. That is how the needs assessment was done. So those were the ages and numbers provided in that assessment package. So I think each district kind of does it a little bit differently. And so that's how it was done. Just going
bizarre.
Yeah, and maybe in this next round, that might be something we can bring up, like even at the early years table when we talk about it, just to compare is easier if it's the same age groups.
And 12 years old, you're allowed to stay at home, especially if you have a certificate saying that you've gone through a little course. So I would like to see the statistics for Squamish and Pemberton to be the same.
Yeah, it's a good point. And just in terms of the licensing, it can be tricky working with licensing, although I always appreciate it because I know it's just ensuring the safety of kids and the quality of our centers. Yes, there are talks from the ministry to streamline many of the things because it's all new and challenging for all of us, and we're learning as we go. It's a little bit of a slippery slope too, because we want to lift up early childhood and really make sure that it's a quality program in place for kids. But that being said, we know our classrooms are as well. So it's a bit complex. And in terms of the 8 o'clock start time, initially we were going to propose just doing after school care. But as we learn more about the rules and the parameters and how we can access funding, for example, for wage top-ups and operating funding support, you are required to operate for 4 hours. So that is why we had to add the 8 to 9 in the morning, because it would only be 3 hours after school. And the other thing in terms of ratios is one thing that we're learning through all these initiatives through Seamless Day is it's actually much safer to have 24 spaces than 12 so that you have 2 adults, because a lot of these after school programs, then you're kind of the only one around. Everybody's kind of gone home. And then if there's an emergency or even taking kids to the washroom. So we actually discussed that and said, we're not even going to try for 12. We're just going straight for 24 because it's just way safer. And then if we have kids with complexities, there's just 2 adults is just a good thing there. Yeah.
Yeah, in the covered area.
Yeah, and that's an ongoing thing that I don't think it's just going to be solved on the backs of this application. However, absolutely, I know that that's the situation at the schools in Pemberton. Yeah,
Because we do have a lot of woods, but it's off
yeah,
property and it's full of bears. So our children they're still going in there, knowing that they're not allowed, and the EAs are having to pull them out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions?
If it helps, Melissa, the same thing happens at my child's school in Squamish. exactly the same. The EAs have their work cut out for them, for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. I just had a couple of questions. They're pretty quick, I hope. You mentioned that at one of the schools, there's going to be an empty classroom and you'll utilize that for the childcare space. What happens if the school enrollment goes up and things change? Have you got a plan for that? I'm sure you do.
Yeah, we do. And currently it's not scheduled. The Berger projections and all of the things we're looking at, it's not scheduled to be used anytime soon. And if it does happen in the next 2 to 10 years, then we work at sharing the space. So having or relocating. One of the easier things to do is relocate the programs to the gymnasium or the library. It's not necessarily there are pros and cons to all these situations. You can have a shared space where the classroom teacher operates during the day as a classroom, and then outside of the day it becomes before and after care. That's a little bit trickier we've discovered for prep and just doing the things that a teacher does at the end of the day in their rooms for an hour plus, etc. But there are options. We've come at this before. When Mamcom was really big, we had to relocate the childcare into the library. And we did that for 3 or 4 years and it worked well. It's not without some hiccups, but again, we'll make those things happen.
Perfect. I thought as much. And then the other thing I was just curious about, and I could be wrong, maybe I misheard, but did you say that for Squamish Elementary, you were going to create 2 spaces and one was going to be before and after, and the other was going to be Strong Start?
So, well, yes, that's technically accurate. So currently the space right now is before and after and Strong Start. When there is an expansion, so there'll be 2 spaces that we're trying to figure out so we're expanding the clientele too. So likely some older kids will be there. Strong Start is for the littlest ones. And so thinking that maybe more fine motor or little younger children might appreciate one space, and then the second space likely will just be for after school age, and then maybe for the bigger kids or kids that want more gross motor, because it's not necessarily always about age. It could be a fine motor, gross motor, it could be a lot of different things. This is the wonderful thing that Heather will do such a pristine job of is co-creating those spaces with the community and with Sea to Sky and all of those things to figure out what's going to work best. We just have options, but likely, yes, one of the spaces will be just for or only used by Strong Start. Strong Start won't use both spaces likely as it stands today.
Okay. And you think that's just because I see the programs being empty rooms for a lot of the time, just because of when they operate. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, the focus though is that the needs are better met if there's 2 different spaces, because physically the kids are such different ages. They have
and if
really different needs.
If I mean, again, with our partnerships with Sea to Sky, and they're like, oh no, actually Strong Start would benefit from using both rooms. We'll make it happen. Or they're like, hey, this would be a great place to run our whatever program during the day. That's fine too. There's just all the logistics too about we have a school running. So the more people that are just showing up randomly, I mean, they're easy to identify as Strong Start. They typically have strollers and toddlers, but depending on what those other programs are. But it is a really good back and forth relationship to assure that spaces are utilized, because it is a large investment by the ministry, in our time and Sea to Sky's time. So we will make sure that the spaces are used as well as they can.
Perfect. Okay, terrific. That's all I have. And Lisa, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to follow back up on Melissa's point. In the past, there's been grants available for past skin cancer survivors. So there are grants available through the Cancer Society and through the Ministry of Health for some of those covered spaces.
Okay.
So I just want to put that on. Yeah, like the amount of sun versus would be good to start searching some of those.
Perfect. Thanks for that. Just checking Rachel. Okay. I see no other hands up. So at this time, and thank you both for your presentation and for all of the work you're doing. It's pretty exciting times as the ministry expands into childcare, and I'm sure the excitement factor has not been lost on both of you. I'm sure there's a lot of things that have really changed as we incorporate childcare into the Ministry of Education. So thank you for that work. It's it's new and it's exciting, and I think it's providing fantastic need. It's serving, it's really helping communities and parents and families, and thank you for taking on all those challenges. So with that, we do have 2 recommendations, and is there someone who is ready to make the first recommendation?
I can take the first one.
Thank you.
The ministry, the finance committee recommend the Board of Education approve the 2025-2026 major capital plan as presented.
Thank you. And thank you, Lisa. April, thank you for seconding. Any other discussion? All in favor? Three, four, five. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. I see none opposed, so that is passed. And the second recommendation, anyone prepared to make that recommendation? Thanks.
That the Finance Committee recommend the Board of Education approve the 2024-2025 minor capital plan for Signal Hill Elementary as presented.
Thank you, April. Thank you, Lisa. Any further comments or questions? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's passed. Thank you so much. Those are both passed. And again, thank you so much for all the work that you did on both of those documents and those presentations. It was really appreciated. Lovely.
Can I say something really quickly?
Go ahead.
The fence where they're doing the work between Signal Hill and Village of Pemberton, there's signs on it that have dinosaurs in comparison to the machinery that's working in there. I'm not sure if you had anything to do with that, but it is so cool.
That was Tom Sima.
Oh,
Maybe some input from the school as well.
yeah, it's just adorable.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
The village has been really great,
Mhm.
trying to make it safe.
Well, they have all that machinery there.
Yeah.
Maybe they could do some work on the other side of that.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, boy. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. We're scheduled to finish up this meeting at 12:45. So let's quickly move on to item C, which is the annual budget and bylaw. So I'll turn that over to Danielle or Alana.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to it. All the documents are attached. We did make a few changes from the last reading, so I will pass it over to Alana to go over what those changes are.
Thank you, Danielle. Let me share the screen. If I'm able to. So this budget presented here is annual best estimate for 24-25 budget, second reading. And I will mostly focus on the changes that we have made since first reading in May. This summary shows all operating and special purpose funds and enrollment FTEs, and there were no changes to domestic enrollment. So the same number of domestic students. There were no announcements from the ministry about new funding, so it makes our operating grant the same like we read in May, 63.2 million. Other revenues have been adjusted slightly for those 2 agreements with School District 93 and School District 78 for Colquhoun School to reflect our current amounts. Total down approximately for both 10,000 less. There have been increase in based on current registrations for international students, 9.3 FTE of international students increase, or 138,000 of tuition revenue are reflected here. The other change that we have made since May was a better estimate of carry forwards for special purpose grants. So 100,000 less carry forwards. As we progress and we spend, we see that 333,000 that we read in May not going to happen. So we adjusted this amount to better reflect our expected carry forwards in special purpose grants. So the total revenues are 78.3 million. There have been made allocations of these revenues. Because of international students, there was slight increase in allocation to schools, 100,000 more. Oh, 60,000 more. Other allocations, I highlighted them in yellow so that to show which change, where we made changes. Under itinerant services, learning services increased slightly, like just $700 because of QP rates changes. And technology support increase was 13,000 for to enhance we started enhancing our cybersecurity, which is going to change further when we will be reading amended budget, because a lot of changes required there. And the more information is coming, the more we know. And currently, this increased budget for technology support doesn't show the full possible coverage that allocations that we can make and we're going to make. But currently, we are doing estimates what is the best approach to properly address cybersecurity threats. Under educational support, there were some changes. Educational support programs and initiatives increased 25,000 compared to last reading to allocate to a provincial educational plan. There were also slight decrease, 18,000 in Indigenous education. It's related to adjusted agreement amount for the school district 78 Fraser Cascade to support Kalakum schools. Previous few years we had additional services to the school to respond to wildfires and also bring some generator. So this year we are just back to normal operations. So it went down slightly.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? So Elena mentioned that we added money to the education plan, and that's because we're redoing our education plan next year. So we're going to need extra money to plan events, and so we need extra money for that. So that was bumped up because of that. So thank you, International. They helped pay for some of that.
Also, early learning programs went slightly up, just 5,000. Also, the same reason, QP rates went up. Next adjustment made, utilities and buildings under operations, maintenance, and transportation stayed pretty much the same, just slight increase, like $400 to reflect new known from the ministry recovery amount for Next Generation Network. And there were some changes on the district services, on the educational administration. There was an increase in almost 26,000 in subsidies to schools to recover cost of principals, vice principals for schools that have vice principals, to support schools to allow them to have those vice principals if needed. So with students more than 300. And also in international education. So obviously we increased because we had more tuition revenue. So that brought us to total allocated revenues of 78.3 million. And our unallocated contingency went 4,000 down from 5,000 to 1,000. This amount is added back to our unallocated operating accumulated surplus, which is still like within the range between 1% and 4% of current year operating expenses to support our operations. So we can look at more details, all these changes that were made. Also highlighted them So that would be easier to navigate, maybe. A little bit more specific on the learning services. There was $700 increase on the occupational therapy and physical therapy because of QP rates increase.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So this is something that we use Sea to Sky Community Services. They actually provide the service for us. And so they did tell us that the rates, just like our QP, they have QP staff just like us, and their rates were going up too. So we had to increase the amount of the contract, take that into consideration.
Yeah, this is contracted service, contracted out. So when it's also unionized employees, so their rates increase, our services, our cost increase. Next change, like I said, to the district information technology systems operations, 13,000 increase. We started enhancing our cybersecurity. It may require a different enhanced license from Microsoft to have services to be to be protected from cyber attacks, but this amount will be further reviewed in amended budget. It may require further increases up. The next change was made to show under these 3 educational support programs. Provincial educational plan initiatives, 25,000 up from the first reading in May to make the plan. Next one is indigenous education. So targeted stays the same. It's just a agreement with Fraser Cascade School District, 18,000 down from previous year.
Yeah, and just a note on that one, it's probably going to go up because this is just to cover the current costs, but they haven't given us money for food yet for next year for Feeding Futures because they haven't allocated it out to their schools yet. So that's going to be increased in the amended budget. So we're expecting money for Feeding Futures from them as well. So.
Right. And next one is Strong Start, 5,000 increase. Again, it is contracted services. The QP rates went up, so our cost went up accordingly. And a few more increases under operation, maintenance, and transportation. Utility cost. This is a recovery cost that ministry recovers from school districts because they provide services. And we updated up to better known amount that we know that we will be charged next year. The increase was just $500. And to other changes on the district services, educational administration, and here we go, subsidy cost for vice principals. It went up 26,000 since last reading. And another update was international education. Commissions and medical plan premiums depend on number of students. So if students go up, so our cost goes up. So this was an update, 40,000 for international education. The total is here, I said 78.3 million for allocated revenues. If you go to the budget by law, or maybe we should go into infographics, or I'm not sure what is the best way to now show. So on the budget by law, first I would like to show the very first page. You can see showing our enrollment here, this number of students. I just wanted to clarify, I'm not sure if you know that it includes September February and May count broken into school age and adults. And adults include only non-graduated adults because graduated adults are funded completely differently. It's not showing even on a budget bylaw. So next thing I would like to show in budget bylaw is Schedule 2, which is operating revenue and expenses, which you could see when Danielle presented multi-year financial plan. Last page was showing next year budget. This was this Schedule 2. If you want to see where things are coming from, so this Schedule 2 is a reflection of like the numbers are to multi-year financial plan next year budget coming from this schedule. And I wanted to show you that 142,000 are going to be spent on capital purchases. 90,000 is equipment for the maintenance, vehicles or equipment, whatever the need would be. And another 52,500 are school budgeted on their preliminary budget to purchase computers. And also we are not allowed, school districts are not allowed to have a deficit on operating budget. So this Schedule 2 always zero. And Statement 2, which shows all revenues and all expenses. It has budgeted deficit of 515,000, which is the full amount of deficit of capital operations. This is the difference between amortization of our deferred capital revenue, that contributions from the province that we recognize that many years ago we were given land and buildings and we recognize every year the portion of it. This is the revenue, amortization of deferred capital assets. And the expense on this schedule is amortization of capital assets that we actually purchased every year. Whatever we purchased, we add to our existing capital assets and we amortize. So the difference between those two amounts are usually related to, first of all, to the fact that first year of operations of any capital additions are amortized only half. And another reason, it's just that amortization of deferred capital revenue doesn't include purchases from local capital because we purchase it ourselves and it's not the province gave us this money for capital spending. We purchase it out of our operating fund. That's little difference shows here as negative. We are allowed to have negative, to have deficit on capital operations. So, any question? So this amount is brought to the total bylaw, $515,922. $24 is our deficit for the year, and operating operations all balanced through appropriation of use of our accumulated surplus. Any questions? Or should we go through infographics, or it's clear? Should we go through graphs?
Yeah, go ahead, Ellen.
Okay. This is visual representation of what we would just looked at. Sources of revenues, you can see this blue, orange, and gray are all coming from the province. Enrollment funding, 55% of our revenue, 12% of unique student needs, and another 9% of supplemental funding, for the total of 76% coming from the province. Other sources of revenues, international, 2.4 million, or 3% of our total revenues. And special purpose funds are 10.6 million, or 13% of our total revenues. And other sales, 6.6 million, or 8% of our total revenues are interest, rentals, and also local education agreement from Lillooet Nation. surplus of operation are virtually 0%. And student growth, there's no growth, but it's just broken into categories for kindergarten, grade 1, 6, and 7, 9, 10, 12. And this total, I'm not sure why this is not showing here, but we had 5,100 head count, which generated 5,152.3 FTE. FTE is high because students grade 10 to 12 takes more courses, more than 8 courses per year. So they generate more FTE. This historical revenue, 10 years of expenses and enrollments, revenues, expenses, and enrollments, and you can see that our enrollment in 24-25 goes slightly down, and our revenues and expenses slightly up. So this is how it will look like. And allocation of expenditures under those major areas, like if we look into objects, different kind of type of expenses like salaries and benefits versus services and supplies, you can see that 86% of our expenses are salaries and benefits, and only 14% is services and supplies. District budget expenses broken into like biggest percentage of district level expenses are 34% are leave provisions. It became the biggest part of district expenses, and the rest is pretty consistent percentage out of the total district expenses. Educational support, biggest expenses, itinerary teacher and indigenous education. Those are biggest areas in educational support. Also, early learning is growing last 3 years because it became now like we have new special purpose funds and we have new revenues. Another big area of our allocations to see where overall allocations are going. We can see that 63% of our revenues are allocated to schools, and educational support is 12% of our total allocations. 13% is maintenance and transportation, and the district is 12%. So unallocated contingency is very small this year. It's not even showing in this chart. This is all I wanted to show you. And if you have questions, please ask.
Thank you so much for that. Are there any questions at this time? Yeah, go ahead, Celeste.
So thank you, Elena. I know it's always a lot to prepare these. My question is actually related to cybersecurity and what the district has planned for educating employees on cybersecurity, and just when you have an educated workforce, it can minimize the impact of threats that come in. So what's being done? And I think that should probably include us. And I'm asking this because we haven't seen anything. So
yeah, what I would ask is that we actually hold that question, because in the year in review, we actually touch on those topics in terms of what we've done and what's planned, because it is a very important topic. So I really appreciate the question. I can do an overview now if you want, and at the open, or would you?
No, it's fine, Chris. We don't need to do it twice, but I think that educating the people is, and there are resources available that are not going to throw this totally out of whack. So as just one of the prongs of attack in terms of ensuring cybersecurity, making sure that all of us, including us, I don't know if you got that funny email the other day, but I got another funny email from
the phishing attempt. What's happening, folks, unfortunately, is to your point, they're getting more and more shrewd, and because we have a .org address as well, it bypassed the big in yellow that says this is from an external source. So it's much easier for people to go, oh, that must be real. And we didn't recognize the name of the person from the HR. So yes, we're certainly, I'll just say global statement. That we and other districts are all working together on to mitigate those kinds of attempts. And as Elena mentioned, we're looking at purchasing a more comprehensive license from Microsoft around cybersecurity. We're just looking at pricing right now to ensure that it's quite expensive. We know it's necessary, but we're trying to see what core systems we need most protection around, and we'll continue with their efforts around the multi-factor authentication, which again, I believe we'll be moving for all trustees to have to do that as well. So it'll be a little extra step.
Today, starting today.
There we go, to get into your emails, because to your point, we want all of us on the same, on the same page.
I didn't have to do that today.
You will.
Okay.
This email that you're gonna open later.
Yeah.
on.
Coming in at 12:45.
Yeah. An email came during this meeting just about.
Oh, I didn't check it yet.
No, I thought it was Rebecca
Okay.
calling, and so I checked to see, but it was not. It was Chris.
Okay.
Coming at 12:45.
Yeah.
I have one more if I
All
can.
right, go ahead. We have like 2 minutes until.
Okay, the only other thing that I
just.
just wanted to point out, because it was something that I noticed. So in the budget detail at the very, very end under operations, there are line items like employee wellness, employee reward and recognition. And I just didn't notice an increase, but the cost of everything is going up. So, presumably at some point, we're going to have to increase by some incremental amount, the budget amount for those items year to year.
So further being observed by HR also has a budget for those kinds of things. So it's some dual sources, but to your point, absolutely, everything's.
Yeah, it can't stay the same forever. So.
Everything.
With regard to the cybersecurity stuff, the province has to have a cybersecurity. Can they not share it with those of us who are work? Like, can we not get the license
No.
through them?
So basically what's happening right now is the province is looking to go into a procurement for across all school districts, and that's going to be happening in January of next year.
Okay.
So they're going to be posting something, and they're going to be looking to get something for all school districts. So, but we are also doing our own work here. We've done multiple things to ramp up what we have in place, and we're going to continue to do that and until that comes into place.
So eventually this could come out of our budget is what I'm asking.
I don't, that might be a charge back to us. So I doubt it. If anything, it might just go up in expenses.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, we do have a recommendation, and is there anyone prepared to make that recommendation?
I'm open now. That the Finance Committee recommends the Board of Education approve the 2024-2025 annual budget as presented.
And April, thank you for seconding. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Good, thank you. And that is passed. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of your work on that in these times of rising costs. I'm sure it is very challenging. So thank you so much. And with that, we'll ask if there are any questions of clarifications from the public.
Just check here. There's nothing in the inbox, but I'll just check in. Sometimes people email me directly, so I'll just make sure there's nothing there.
Sure.
No, looks good. No
Okay.
questions.
Okay, we have no questions. So I will say that we have concluded all of the business, thank you, all of the business on the agenda.